Hello, welcome to this edition of Intelligent Video Today. I'm your host, Steve Vonderhaar. Join us on the show this time, Mark Mallchok, the co-founder and chief creative strategist over at Brella. Welcome, Mark.
Thanks, Steve. Great to be here.
So tell us a little bit about Brella. A lot of folks might think of you as just your standard issue video events production company, but how do you see yourself in the marketplace?
Yeah, we're a little bit different. So Brella's been around for a while, over 30 years, and we're based just north of Chicago. And we, like our entire industry, we've evolved a lot during that time. We started as a traditional corporate video production company, but we very quickly realized that companies we work with and our clients needed to reach their audiences in many more ways than just video, including through like presentations, software, graphics, content, and events. So we now see ourselves as a specialty creative events agency, and we create and manage these global training and corporate communications for our clients across all of those deliverables.
Now, however you're defining yourself, I imagine you went through quite the bit of change during the pandemic. How did your company position yourself during COVID, and how's it changed since that time?
Yeah, absolutely. We all went through a dramatic change and events more than any, it feels like. During the pandemic, we were all thrown into 100% virtual events. And we really had to become experts in that method of communicating very quickly for our clients. In fact, we were actually really lucky. We started exploring virtual about a year before the pandemic hit. And we had started doing a lot of hybrid shows, basically servicing both in person and those far flung virtual audiences before the pandemic, and spent a lot of time learning how to build virtual platforms, which obviously became essential during the pandemic. So we were doing about 300 event days a year, everything from like small group meetings as people learned how to use Zoom, Google Meet, Teams, as well as those replacement virtual meetings for the larger national sales meetings using virtual platforms with full registration, multiple auditoriums, breakout rooms with access entitlement. So it was a great opportunity for us to learn something new and explore a new way to communicate with a much larger, more distributed audience. In fact, we actually had several shows that we had been doing in person that saw significant growth in some of the reoccurring meetings because they had the ability to go to a larger audience, right? Some of the audience attendance numbers doubled, and we actually saw a lot more attendance from more countries than we ever had before. So it was very different. We learned a lot, but now we're back to hybrid events. And the reason we use hybrid is because all in-person events nowadays are hybrid. Every single one of them has some sort of a virtual component, whether it's a virtual audience, right, or a virtual presenters, right, replacing the typical satellite feeds we used to have, or even just video on demand playback for asynchronous audience viewing.
So, since the pandemic, have you seen the outlook of event planners change? How are they viewing hybrid and virtual events as when they look at their
Yeah.
event portfolio?
No, it's a great question. They, like us, have had to learn a lot and become a lot more flexible, especially as we experience this pendulum swing, right, from in person, slamming over in the pandemic to virtual, and then slamming back to in person, right? So they've had to be really flexible. We've had to be really flexible. Unfortunately, many of their clients, though, for the meeting planners, thought we could just go back to the way things were before, and we can't, right? The genie is out of the bottle. So you have to think about now a virtual audience as well as your live audience. You have to think about virtual presenters as well as people up on stage. You can't just ignore this large number of attendees who are still unable to travel due to time, costs, personal life challenges, right? So now you have to plan for both, which has a huge cost to it, right? Both in time and money. Hybrid is obviously much more expensive than virtual or in person. And planners and event management agencies like us are really getting hit with a number of issues. We've got the clients, right, with those smaller virtual budgets that haven't increased back up to the in-person costs that they were before, and they've forgotten how expensive in-person is. We've got the added cost of hybrid, right? So not only do you have to pay for the in-person and all of the things associated with it, you also have a whole nother team that's doing all of the virtual production, all of the additional cameras that you may not have had in person as well. So there's all of that. And then the last component actually that's a bit of a challenge is the high cost of talent. Is we've lost so many great people in our event industry who have either moved on to an easier or more lucrative job during the pandemic. So we've lost a ton of talent and historical knowledge.
Yeah, and so with all those factors at play, we had the big pendulum swing
Yeah.
post pandemic back to in person events. What do you see happening in 2024 in terms of the predominant way organizations are going to be approaching their events in during this year?
Yeah, the answer is hybrid, right? Hopefully that swing will center and come back to the center, right? But but it has to be a special type of hybrid. Like it can't just be a hybrid that we did in the past pre-pandemic where it was an in-person show, but then we broadcast it. This has to be a hybrid that accounts for both audiences, right? We really need great audience experiences for both the virtual and the in-person attendees. Since most of these meetings have a greater number of virtual attendees, we're actually recommending something a little different and something a little retro, which is this VIP in-person experience that's hybrid. So what that means is actually going back to this old concept of like a TV studio audience, right? So the TV studio audience is added people for the actors or the presenters to see and play off of, get reactions from, but all of the technical elements, the lighting, the audio, the cameras, were all placed in the perfect locations, even if it blocked that smaller studio audience, because the larger TV audience was what was more important from a production standpoint. So we've been doing this actually with this same sort of concept with smaller audience who we invite to the show. We get them involved as a key component for the performance, and we let them see and participate in this sort of behind the scenes element and tell them that they're really an integral part of the show experience. So that's where I see a lot happening in this next year.
Yeah. So now, as a video production provider, you're as
Yep.
much a customer of virtual event
Yep.
platforms as anybody else out there. What do you think these platforms need to be doing to make their venues more relevant in the corporate marketing realm?
No, good question. Yeah, and we are platform agnostic. We use absolutely everything across the board, and then we'll use the best tool for the particular event. So I think there's two parts to this. Virtual platforms and then web streaming platforms. So let me start with the virtual platforms. So virtual platforms, the biggest thing they need to do is reduce costs. In the past, during the pandemic, we were spending like 20K on licensing for a platform. And that was for a big national sales meeting with a lot of bells and whistles and features, but they really need to reduce costs. Nobody is willing to pay that anymore on any of the bigger virtual meetings. So definitely have to reduce costs. They need to be easier access for the audience. Most of the early virtual projects that we did with virtual platforms, we spent a lot of time and energy with the help desk, our help desk team, helping the audience members just get into the platform. And that's, access, but also compatibility. It has to work on all the devices that are out there, especially on corporate laptops. We had one that we tested and trialed, and when we got it for ourselves, it worked beautifully. We got it into the corporate environment inside the network, and it worked on like half of the devices. The rest of them just got this big black window. So there's a lot that platforms are going to need to do to reduce costs, increase features, and it's hard because they don't have as many clients anymore. So a lot of them are consolidating or going out of business and changing. There's a lot of competition from
Yeah.
the web stream side of things. There's a lot. I think they need to look at having better full interactivity. And what I mean by that is like word clouds, polls, gamification with like leaderboards, moderated QA. So they need to incorporate all those things that you get from Poll Everywhere and Mentimeter and Slido, et cetera, and try to integrate some of those in, because we're having to use those outside and bring them in, which works. But again, that would be good. Important to have high quality video. Obviously, everyone's very picky now and demanding of it, especially as everybody has 4K cameras. There needs to be better and more control that we all have, like as producers and directors. So we need to have better audience management, not just mute them and bring them on, but there's a lot of need for bringing people up onto stage and out back into the audience and not letting them disturb the rest of the things. We need to have better layout tools and spotlighting tools and be able to put hip placements in better areas. So green rooms. I mean, there's so many elements on that. There's a lot of tools, and I'll harsh on Teams for a second here, like it auto crops, right? And we're like, but I had content in the window in my virtual. It was right up there. Now it's gone. Why am I? So there's only certain tools. So they just have to be better about letting us do our jobs and being able to use the tools in the best way. Last thing probably is quicker VOD integrations into the platform. So as soon as it's done, being able to not just trim heads and tails, but like do full editing and then automatically bring it in, because our clients want that VOD immediately, that video on demand immediately afterwards. And then Zoom actually is doing this well, but like better vMix integration. Get that in there. Allow us to use tools that let us brand the look and feel of every single person, do lower thirds, do transitions, do multi-pips, do all of those wonderful things within the platform, not have to use something else and then bring it in.
Now, here at IntelliVid Video today, our minds always wander to the world of AI and how it impacts the video marketplace. How do you see AI maybe making virtual events more attractive to users out there? What kind of role can artificial intelligence play in enhancing the online event experience, do you think?
Absolutely, absolutely. No, AI is going to be a very interesting thing over the next year. But I will say that I think it's going to take some time to get over the learning curve. Obviously, AI is changing constantly, right? But there's a huge learning curve to using AI tools, and with the constant innovation that's happening in it, you're constantly learning. And for us, that's less of a challenge, right? That's what we do every single day. But for our clients, it is going to be a challenge on what they feel comfortable using, and the fear of AI. Our corporate clients are, in many cases, are really unwilling to use it due to the fear of losing their content and control of their content, up in the cloud, right? So I think there's a lot of challenges around that. But I think there's a lot of opportunities, right? So a couple of those opportunities are really faster analysis of like the audience trends, what's happening in real time. Look at some of that data analysis and let us make changes in real time during the show, right? So, one of the things that is very interesting is that when you capture that data, you can actually do some of those real-time summaries of the content, real-time generative images of the topics being discussed, kind of like virtual scribes, in an in-person meeting. There's some opportunities for real-time entitlement, for access to locked areas, where if you ask a certain question, or if you respond a certain way, if you raise your hand, maybe it lets you in, or maybe there's served content suggestions based on those questions. So possibilities are just endless.
And then do we see AI playing a role in security as it relates to virtual events at all moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's my biggest and our clients' biggest concerns is really around security. I mentioned this. I think it's partially really the challenge is the lack around education and that fear of that loss of that private content I mentioned. We work with a ton of regulated clients, and we and they just need a lot more education on what AI tools can do with the data. Like, what do they actually do with it? Is it local processing? Is it cloud-based processing? Is it private or is it public? Is it shared? Does it never leave their, like, feeling comfortable and having some sort of a formal security regulation or documentation on that. And then once that's done and they feel comfortable with it, well, then we can explore how to make, events better and easier.
Yeah, when you're dealing with IT in particular, security
Yeah.
is always job one, isn't it? So, look in your crystal ball for me, if you will. Are there certain industries or event use cases that you think will be impacted by AI more than others?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that are going to change over the next year. A lot of trends, I think, that we'll be looking at. Some are impacted by AI. Some are just the evolution of our industry. So, as I mentioned, hybrid meetings, they're going to be huge, right? As we look to come back in that pendulum, right? We look to reintegrate that lost virtual audience. So that's going to be a big part of it. But we have to do the hybrid meetings that have more engagement, more interactivity. We really need to connect with the audience and the audience with each other. I mean, we've got two audiences that need to connect. So I think that's a big part of it. There's a lot of use of new software and hardware options that are coming out of the pandemic that we're starting to be able to take more advantage of. Example are things like higher quality feeds from remote presenters. We send out kits during the pandemic to presenters that they're now still using. Those kits had 4K cameras, audio devices, ring lights, green screens, right? So all of this is going to be something that will have to be used more and more and more and taken advantage of during that. I think another thing that is on the horizon is virtual switching versus on-site. So doing a lot of what we typically used to do on-site remotely. So that gives you access to higher quality talent anywhere in the world. It reduced costs for travel. It's smaller footprints inside of rooms. So I think that's something that is going to be a big thing. And also even on-site, integrating more of these new, smaller, less expensive hardware options onto on-site setups. We're still using gear from like 15, 20 years ago, right? And that's all going to change. When I walk into an in-person these days, the footprint is massive. I mean, just huge amount. And it doesn't have to be. In a lot of the studios that we have and we've set up, everything's much smaller. So that's going to change a little bit, I think. So that's part of it. I think from a people standpoint and a project standpoint, I think as all of our collective projects are getting more complicated, hybrid being a great example, there's a lot of a need for integrating more specialty teams into each project. Like there's more technology, there's more teams, there's more people. It's not just an agency and a client and a planner and an AV company. Now there's more aspects. So the challenge I think that we're going to face for this next year is how do we make this internal planning and communication, which is so much more difficult and complex with all of these partners and teams, how do we make it better? How do we make it easier for everybody? So we need to focus, for pre-production and for that pre-planning, more on this higher level strategy, the technical coordination, that planning component of events, and not just do it the way we've done it before. So meeting planners, clients, AV companies, they can't just do it on their own anymore. Basically as complexity increases, we need to have a new specialized role or team that helps to see these big picture visions, manage all of the disparate specialty areas and elements, and manage this complexity for every client event. So it's very different, much like corporations are innovating and they're implementing a new C-suite role for events. We need to do this for our event team roles, responsibilities, and tasks as we all need to evolve.
Yeah, after 30 years in the business, you'd think you'd have this all down, but it's still a lot of change ahead of us thanks to everything that's going on.
It really is. Every day is a new adventure, which is amazingly exciting and fun, and what, keeps this a passion and exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark Mallchok, Chief Creative Strategist and co-founder over at Brella. Thanks so much for taking the time to visit with us today.
Thanks so much, Steve.
And we thank you for joining us for this edition of Intelligent Video Today. To get access to insight from more thought leaders like Mark Mallchok, just click on the link right below there to subscribe to the Intelligent Video Today channel on YouTube. For IntelliVid Research and Intelligent Video Today, I'm Steve Onderhaar. Thanks for your time.